Hey everybody, welcome back to Language of the Bible. I'm Harry, and today we continue our series in our study of the Gospel of Mark. Last time we began talking about verses 7 through 9, and due to time restraints, we had to cut the video short. But today we're going to continue with the second part of Mark chapter 1, verses 7 through 9. And I'm going to read those verses here for you all in order to sum up things and get us back to where we left off. So Mark chapter 1, verse 7 says, "And he was preaching, saying, 'After me, one is coming.'" This is referring to John the Baptist. And he's talking about the one coming after him. "One who is mightier than I, and I am not fit, I am unworthy to bend down and untie the straps of his sandals. I baptize you with water, but he will baptize you with the Holy Spirit." In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. So last time we talked about John the Baptist and his importance as he's being introduced here as a character in the Gospel of Mark. John talks about the one who is coming after him. We specified that refers to temporal or time-based, someone who comes after him in human history, not necessarily someone who follows behind him as a disciple. It also talks about John the Baptist being unworthy. The person who's coming after him is more important than him. He's more significant than him. He is more powerful than him. And he is not worthy to tie or untie the straps of his sandals. John says that he will baptize with the Holy Spirit. The baptism that John provides, a baptism merely of water, it does not compare to the power of this coming figure who is a spirit-endowed messianic personality who will baptize his followers with the Holy Spirit. And this combination of water and spirit is a linguistic connection to Ezekiel chapter 36. And we see lots of other passages in the Old Testament that prophesy of this coming figure who is a spirit-endowed figure. And now we will pick up where we left off, which is verse 9, where it talks about Jesus, who's now entering the scene. He's coming into the picture. It says that Jesus comes, the Greek word erchomai. This same word is used by John earlier when he says the one that comes after him, erchetai. So earlier on, the same Greek root, erchomai, is used to describe the coming one, the stronger one. And now Jesus is described as the one who comes. So there's a linguistic connection to make it clear to the reader that this is the same person. The one that John the Baptist was talking about, the coming figure, is now here in the present, and that is Jesus. It says that he came in those days, and that phrase, those days, translates the Greek phrase, ekenais hemarais. And this is a term commonly used to refer to the eschatological latter times in the Septuagint. Quite often you see this phrase, in those days, ekenais hemerais. It is used in Joel chapter 2, which we mentioned earlier in last video. In Joel, God is the eschatological spirit giver. Here, Jesus comes. He is the stronger, mightier one, already alluded to by John the Baptist, who will bestow the Spirit upon his people. So other passages that include the phrase ekenais hemerais are Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 33, and Zechariah chapter 8, verse 23. With the commencement of Jesus' public ministry, those days, the ekenais hemerais, prophesied by the Old Testament prophets of old, the prophets from long ago, those days are now here. Jesus ushers in those days, the ekenais hemerais. So here comes Jesus from the town of Nazareth, and he is singled out. All these others that are mentioned here are coming from Judea. There's specifically many from Jerusalem. We find that here in Mark chapter 1. But he is not from the south at all. He is not from Jerusalem. He is not from Judea. He is not from where this scene is taking place. He is from the north. He is from Galilee, which already at that time, there was a disparaging view of Galileans by the Judeans. The Judeans did not look favorably towards the Galileans and vice versa. Not only is Jesus from Galilee, but he's also from a tiny, little-known village called Nazareth. And Nazareth is so historically insignificant that there is no mention of it at all in the writings of Josephus. Josephus, a very important first century Jewish historian, does not make any reference to Nazareth, which is notable because Josephus himself was from Galilee, so he probably would have known about Nazareth, but there was nothing to write about it. In the voluminous Talmud, the authoritative writings for Jewish practice, there is no mention of Nazareth there either. Again, lots of geographical references to other places in first century Palestine, but no mention at all of Nazareth. Both of these sources deal a lot with the Palestinian geography. However, they omit any reference to Nazareth. That is how insignificant Nazareth would have been considered in first century times. Scholars believe that the town of Nazareth might have had a population of about 400 people, or maybe even smaller. This is a tiny village, not too many people. Many people would have known each other, or at least known of each other's families. Not only is Nazareth an insignificant village, but the entire region known as Galilee had a lower status than that of Judea, as I mentioned earlier. Judean Jews, quite often, they looked down upon and they scorned the Galilean Jews. Yochanan ben Zakkai, the Pharisaic president of the Sanhedrin during the times of the temple's destruction in 70 AD, he was allowed by Emperor Vespasian to found a rabbinic school in the Galilean town of Yavne. This was a reward for prophesying the victory of Vespasian. The prophet Yochanan ben Zakkai prophesied that the Jews would lose the war and that the Romans would win the war. And as a reward, Vespasian granted him, although Judea had been destroyed, he granted him the right to found this new rabbinic school in the town of Yavne. Yochanan ben Zakkai is quoted in the Talmud as lamenting the challenge of working with Galilean Jews because they were not considered to be Torah observant. As far as the Judean Jews go, they were beneath them in their observance of the Torah. So already there was that struggle between Judean Jews and Galilean Jews. Now, verse 9 shares a lot of parallels to verse 5, which we covered a few weeks ago. Both have characters that include their places of origin. You have Jesus from Nazareth, and then you have the all from Judea and the all from Jerusalem. Both have verbs of movement. We have the all that are coming, where the Greek word ekporuomai is used, and we have the Jesus coming, his movement, which is described with the Greek word echomai. I think two different words are used intentionally, more than anything, to distinguish these characters, and also to make it clear that Jesus, the echomai, is related to the coming one, the stronger and mightier one that John the Baptist had already alluded to earlier. Now, there are also some notable contrasts between verse 9 and verse 5. Jesus is from lowly Galilee, and the all are from the prestigious Judea, as I mentioned earlier. Jesus comes, echomai, the others come, ekporiomai. As mentioned earlier, the word ekporiomai was used several times in the Exodus narratives. The same Exodus narratives that serve as a foundation for the new Exodus experience and the return from exile that's described in the prophets, in particular Malachi and Isaiah. The word distinguishes the all as those who are returning from exile. These are those who have responded to Yahweh's forerunner, to John the Baptist, and they are awaiting his spirit, Yahweh's spirit, to be poured out on them, as it was prophesied in Joel chapter 2. Jesus, however, is not the all. He is the one who comes, the Erchomai. This identifies him with the messianic figure of Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9, where the same word Erchomai is used. This word Erchomai is also the same one used a few verses ago by John. Jesus is the mightier, stronger one who is to come. Jesus, the one, versus the all. That's what we're seeing here. So here we have this concept of Jesus as the one versus the all. Here we see the vicarious concept of the one for the many, which has great significance in the New Testament. And we see this concept of the one for the many repeated throughout the New Testament writings. We see it later in Mark chapter 10, verse 45, in our very same gospel that we're studying. And we also see it in Romans chapter 5, verse 17. Jesus here serves as the true Israelite, or the true Israel. He stands in solidarity with Israel and represents Israel in his very person. This concept of one versus all also points towards the suffering servant of Isaiah, a figure we see mentioned repeatedly through Isaiah, in particular between chapters 40 and 55. These are passages that heavily influence Mark's gospel. This figure is depicted in Isaiah as the true Israel. In some cases, he's identified as Israel or Jacob, and in other cases, he is clearly distinguished from Israel. So this is exactly who Jesus is. He is the embodiment of the true Israel, but he's also separate from Israel. A final contrast we will note is the fact that the all come confessing their sins, and Jesus does not. There is no mention of Jesus confessing sin as he comes, unlike the all. We will learn as we read the rest of the gospel and the rest of the New Testament that this is because Jesus was without sin. Jesus is the coming one. He is the mightier and stronger one. Now, Rashi, a very influential French medieval rabbi, had said that might and strength is not merely a matter of physical prowess, but it's also a matter of moral integrity. And in this very sense, Jesus is also the mightier and stronger one. His moral integrity is incomparable. The others, the all, they approach John the Baptist while confessing their sins, and Jesus approaches John in all of his righteousness. Jesus is baptized by John the Baptist not because he is sinful and in need of repentance and forgiveness, but for the same reason as why he died on the cross. Because he is in solidarity with Israel, and he is in solidarity with the human race. Jesus is not only the representative of Israel as the true Israel, but he is also the representative of the entire human race as the second Adam. His baptism foreshadows his death, in that baptism in water can be seen as a symbol of death. And we find precedent for that in Psalms chapter 69, verse 2, in Jonah chapter 2, verses 3 to 5, in Mark chapter 10, verse 38, and in Romans chapter 6, verse 4. All of these verses talk about immersion or submersion into water as a symbol or symbolic representation of the death experience. The contribution of Mark and the New Testament authors in general to messianic thought and theology is combining the future Davidic king prophecies of the Old Testament with the suffering servant songs of Isaiah 40 to 66. Prior to the New Testament writings, we had not really seen much evidence of these prophecies being linked and combined to one another. The Jews did not then, and still do not today, see the Messiah in the suffering servant songs. They see them as strictly applying to the nation of Israel, not to a particular individual. This is true in part because Jesus represents true Israel. However, a clue that these passages are referring to an individual, and in particular, the messianic individual, is the use of the word avdi. Now, this means my servant. This word is used more often to refer to King David and his lineage than any other figures in the Old Testament. We find in 2 Samuel chapter 7 verses 5 through 8, in 1 Kings chapter 3 verse 6, in 2 Kings 8 verse 19, in Isaiah chapter 37 verse 35, in Jeremiah chapter 33 verse 21, and Ezekiel chapter 34 and verse 23. These are all examples of God referring to David by the Hebrew Hebrew term avdi, my servant. And this is the same word that's used here in the suffering servant songs to refer to the servant of Yahweh. He is God's servant, which is a term referred to by the first, or used to refer to the first Davidic king, and that now points to the future Davidic king, that is the Messiah. This clue is further enhanced by the fact that in the servant song found in Isaiah chapter 42, verse 1, the Avdi, God's servant, is also called by God as Becheri, the Hebrew word Becheri, which means my chosen one. Every single time that the Hebrew word Avdi is combined with the Hebrew word Becheri in the Old Testament, it's talking about King David. We find two other occurrences, Psalms chapter 78, verse 70, and Psalm chapter 89, verse 3. In both of these passages, we have the Hebrew word Avdi, my servant, and the Hebrew word Becheri, my chosen one. And in both of those passages, it's referring to King David. So there is no reason to not see that here in Isaiah chapter 42, it is also referring to King David, but not the original King David, but as is often the case in the latter prophets, when King David is being referred to in a future sense, they are talking about the Davidic descendant. They are talking about the Messianic king, in this case, Jesus, the Messiah. We also see some parallels between this servant and Moses, who aside from King David, is the figure in the Old Testament to whom the phrase Avdi is most often applied to. We see in Isaiah chapter 42, verse 4, that the servant brings justice, the Hebrew word mishpat, and he brings law, the Hebrew word Torah, to all the earth, to all the coastlands. These are two different ideas that allude to the Gentiles, the nations. These words, mishpat and Torah, are words associated with Moses as the lawgiver. Now the question is, who is responsible for billions upon billions of Gentiles knowing the Torah, knowing the scriptures, knowing God's judgments for over the last 2,000 years? That is Jesus, the Messiah. We see in Isaiah chapter 42, verse 6, that the servant was a covenant maker just like Moses. And this covenant is made with the people, the Am, the Hebrew word Am. The word Am is usually reserved for Israel. The servant is also to be a light, or the Hebrew word or, for the Gentiles or to the Gentiles. And here we have the Hebrew word goy. So just as Am usually refers to Israel, the goy refers to the Gentiles, the outside nations, who here the servant is going to be a light to them. The same word light, or the Hebrew word or, is often associated with God's Torah. We find in Psalms chapter 119, verse 105, and Proverbs 6, verse 23, that God's Torah is also an or. It's a light. Jesus begins his Sermon on the Mount, found in Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, saying, "You are the salt of the earth," a term that's more associated with the land of Israel. "And you are the light of the world." And that is a light to the nations. The Sermon on the Mount is nothing other than Jesus' interpretation and application of the Torah. And that is it for today. We're going to call it quits right there, and we will continue next time. Please comment down below if you have any questions, any concerns, any disagreements, or any prayer requests. We're here to listen. Take care and God bless. Bye-bye.